The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse like accusations Elena couldn't voice. She stood in the living room she had decorated with such care 3 years ago, watching her husband Adrian emerge from their bedroom with suitcases, her suitcases that he dropped at her feet, with the same casual indifference he might discard unwanted furniture. "I need you to leave tonight," Adrian said, not quite meeting her eyes. Even now, even doing this, he couldn't fully face what he was doing. Simone is moving in tomorrow, and it would be awkward. Elena's hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly, 6 months of pregnancy evident beneath her silk dress. The baby kicked as if sensing her distress, a tiny foot pressing against her palm like a question she couldn't answer. "How did we get here?" "Awkward," she repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Your secretary moving into our home while your pregnant wife is still here would be awkward." "Don't be dramatic." Adrian finally looked at her, and Elena saw a stranger wearing her husband's face. When had those blue eyes grown so cold? When had that mouth she had kissed 1,000 times learned to curl with such contempt? "You've known about Simone for months. This shouldn't come as a surprise." He was right about that, at least. She had known. The late-night meetings that smelled of unfamiliar perfume, the lipstick on his collar in a shade she had never wear, the way he had started flinching when she touched him, as though her pregnant body repulsed him, while Simone's carefully maintained figure attracted him like gravity. "I'm 6 months pregnant with your child," Elena said, hating how her voice broke. "Where exactly do you expect me to go?" "That's not my problem anymore." Adrian moved to the bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch with steady hands. How could his hands be steady? "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch about the prenuptial agreement. You'll get what's stipulated, nothing more." The prenuptial agreement. Elena almost laughed. If he only knew. 3 years ago, when Elena Castellano had married Adrian Northwood, she had been a nobody, or so he thought. An orphan who worked as a docent at the art museum where they had met, pretty enough but unremarkable. Grateful to be chosen by a man of his wealth and status. She had signed his prenuptial agreement without reading it, playing the role of the naive girl dazzled by his $10,000 suits and penthouse views. What Adrian didn't know, what nobody knew except Elena's late father's lawyer, was that Elena Castellano was the sole heir to the Castellano fortune, a multinational investment empire worth $12 billion. For 25 years, the public had believed old Roberto Castellano had no children, that his fortune would be divided among charities when he died. The truth was more complicated. Elena's mother had been Roberto's first and greatest love, a painter he had met in Florence when he was building his empire. But she had been married to another man when they fell in love, trapped in a violent relationship she couldn't escape. When she became pregnant with Elena, Roberto had made a choice. He would protect them from the shadows, provide for them anonymously, but never claim them publicly to keep them safe from her husband's rage and the predators who circled wealth like sharks. Elena's mother had died when she was 10, officially in a car accident, though Elena had always wondered if her stepfather had finally made good on his threats. Roberto had continued to watch over Elena from a distance, paying for her education through scholarships, ensuring she wanted for nothing while teaching her to value herself beyond money. When Roberto died 5 years ago, his lawyer had found Elena working at the museum and explained her inheritance. But there was a condition. She had to keep her identity secret until her 30th birthday, managing the fortune through proxies and trusts. Roberto had seen too many heirs destroyed by sudden wealth, too many families torn apart by inheritance battles. He wanted Elena to learn who she was without the weight of billions defining her. She had been 23 then, 7 years from her 30th birthday. She had used her hidden wealth, carefully investing in companies through a web of shell corporations and trusts, building an empire while living a modest life. One of her first investments had been a controlling 60% stake in Northwood Enterprises, Adrian's commercial real estate company. Adrian Northwood, the ambitious developer with ice blue eyes and a smile that had once made her believe in fairy tales, had no idea his wife secretly owned his company. Had no idea that every deal he closed, every property he acquired, happened because Elena's investment fund provided the capital. Had no idea that the mysterious Castellano group that had saved him from bankruptcy 2 years ago was controlled by the woman he was now throwing out like trash. "The prenup gives me $50,000, Elena said quietly. "That's what you think I'm worth. $50,000 and whatever personal possessions I brought into the marriage." "Which was nothing," Adrian said, downing his scotch. You came with nothing, Elena. You should be grateful I'm giving you anything at all. Something inside Elena cracked not her heart, which had broken weeks ago when she had finally accepted who Adrian really was, but something deeper. Her last thread of patience. Her last shred of hope that the man she had loved might still exist somewhere beneath his cruelty. You're right, she said, moving toward the suitcases. I came with nothing. Adrian looked relieved, probably expecting her to collapse into tears and pleas. Instead, Elena picked up one suitcase, then another, moving toward the door with her head high despite the weight in her hands and her belly. Where will you go? He asked it casually, an afterthought, the way you might wonder about a stray dog you had kicked out of your garage. Why do you care? I don't really. But Simone worries you'll make a scene. Show up at my office, embarrass me in front of clients. Of course. Even now, it was about Simone. The other woman who had whispered poison in his ear for months, who had worked as his secretary for 2 years before seducing him with carefully planned efficiency. Elena had actually liked Simone at first, had trusted her, even confided in her about how distant Adrian had become after learning about the pregnancy. Tell Simone she has nothing to worry about, Elena said, reaching for the door. She won after all. She gets you, this penthouse, your name, your money, everything she wanted. Good. Adrian poured another drink. Leave your keys and security access on the table. Elena set down the suitcases long enough to remove the penthouse key from her ring and place her access card beside it. She kept her other keys, the ones to the safety deposit box containing the documentation of her real identity, the keys to the properties Adrian didn't know she owned, the keys to the life she had kept secret. She picked up the suitcases again and opened the door. The hallway beyond was empty, the building's other penthouse residents presumably asleep or politely ignoring whatever domestic drama was unfolding. Rich people were good at pretending not to notice inconvenient things. Elena, Adrian called as she reached the elevator. She turned, and for a moment, one terrible, hopeful moment, she thought he might apologize, might realize what he was doing, might remember the man he had been when they met, the one who had quoted poetry to her in the museum and made her believe love could be real. Don't contact me directly anymore. Everything goes through the lawyers. The elevator doors open. Elena stepped inside, suitcases and all, and pressed the button for the lobby. As the door slid closed, she saw Adrian turn back to his scotch, already dismissing her from his mind. The elevator descended 53 floors while Elena's life fell apart. Before we continue with Elena's story, I need to tell you something important. Most people will scroll past this story, never knowing how it ends. They'll miss the moment when Elena makes her choice, the moment that will shock you and make you question everything you believe about revenge and forgiveness. They'll never know about Simone's dark secret or the night when Adrian finally understands what he's lost. If you keep scrolling now, you'll wonder forever what happened next. You'll think about this story at random moments in the shower, driving to work, lying awake at night and regret not finishing it. Don't be that person. Stay until the end. Elena's journey deserves to be witnessed, and you deserve to know the truth about how this story concludes. Keep watching. The next part will change everything. The rain that had been threatening all evening began in earnest as Elena emerged from Adrian's building. No, not Adrian's building. Her building. She owned it through one of her property trusts, though Adrian paid rent to a management company that had no idea the ultimate owner was his soon-to-be ex-wife. She stood on the sidewalk with her 2 suitcases, the rain soaking through her designer dress within seconds. The doorman who had known her for 3 years looked away, embarrassed. He had probably already received instructions from Adrian not to help her. Elena pulled out her phone to call a car, but her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. The baby kicked again, harder this time, and suddenly the reality of her situation hit her like a physical blow. She was 6 months pregnant. She was being divorced. She was standing in the rain with 2 suitcases, and she had $12 billion that she couldn't access openly without revealing her identity. The last part was the cruelest irony. Elena could buy a hotel hell. She could buy the hotel chain, but if she did it openly, using her real resources, everyone would know who she really was. The terms of her father's will were clear. Maintain anonymity until her 30th birthday, now just 3 months away, or forfeit the entire fortune to charity. Roberto had designed it that way deliberately. He had wanted Elena to understand that wealth without wisdom was curse, not a blessing. He had wanted her to learn who she was when the world didn't know what she had. He had wanted her to find people who valued her for herself, not her money. Well, she had learned that lesson, hadn't she? She had learned it when Adrian had fallen in love with who he thought she was, a nobody, with no money and no prospects. And she had learned it again when he had fallen out of love the moment a younger, more exciting woman appeared. Elena scrolled through her contacts, looking for someone to call. Her friend Rebecca? No. Rebecca was Adrian's colleague's wife, loyal to that social circle. Her cousin on her mother's side? They hadn't spoken in years, not since Elena's stepfather had poisoned that relationship with lies. The museum co-workers from before her marriage? She had lost touch when Adrian had slowly, subtly isolated her from everyone who had known her before she became Mrs. Northwood. She had no one. Elena stood in the rain, 6 months pregnant and effectively alone in a city of 8 million people, and felt the full weight of how thoroughly Adrian had cut her off from the world. It had happened so gradually she had barely noticed a comment here about how her friends weren't sophisticated enough for their new lifestyle, a suggestion there about how she should focus on their marriage rather than maintaining outside relationships. Now she understood it had been a strategy, perhaps unconscious, but effective. Isolate her so completely that leaving him would seem impossible. A taxi splashed past, soaking her further. Elena closed her eyes and took a breath. She was stronger than this. She had survived her stepfather's abuse. She had survived losing her mother. She had survived learning she was an heiress while living as a working-class orphan. She could survive this. She would survive this. Elena made 3 calls. The first was to a hotel downtown, not one of the luxury properties she secretly owned, but a mid-range business hotel where she could pay in cash without raising questions. The second was to Benjamin Wright, her father's lawyer and the only person who knew her full identity. Miss Castellano, Benjamin answered on the second ring, his voice concerned. Benjamin was 60, gray-haired, and had been Roberto's closest friend. It's past midnight. Is everything all right? No, Elena said, watching headlights blur through the rain. Everything is not all right, but I can't talk about it on the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Of course. Where are you staying? She gave him the hotel name and hung up before he could ask more questions. The third call was to a car service. 10 minutes later, a sedan pulled up, and the driver helped her load her suitcases without commenting on her rain-soaked appearance or obvious pregnancy. Small mercies. The hotel room was clean, generic, forgettable, everything Elena's penthouse hadn't been. She sat on the bed in her wet clothes, too exhausted to change, and stared at the wall. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Richard Chen from Sterling and Associates. I represent Adrian Northwood in the matter of your divorce. Please confirm receipt of this message and your current address for service of papers. Adrian had wasted no time. She had been gone less than 2 hours, and he had already had his lawyer reach out. Elena deleted the message without responding. Another text, this time from Adrian himself. Did you take the diamond earrings? Simone says they're missing from the jewelry box. The diamond earrings Adrian had given Elena for their second anniversary. The ones he had presented with champagne and promises about forever. Simone wanted them now, apparently. Wanted to wear the jewelry intended for the wife she had helped discard. Elena typed back, they're in my suitcase. They were a gift to me. The prenup says I keep personal gifts. His response came immediately. Those earrings cost $45,000. That counts against your $50K settlement. She stared at the message, something cold and sharp forming in her chest. He was nickel and diming her over earrings. He had thrown his pregnant wife into the street, and now he was worried about jewelry. Elena's fingers moved across the screen before she could stop herself. Keep the earrings. Give them to Simone. I don't want anything from you anymore. She powered off the phone before he could respond and finally let herself cry. Benjamin Wright arrived at Elena's hotel room at 9 the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a leather portfolio. He took one look at her face and set everything down to pull her into a hug, the first genuine human warmth she had felt in months. Tell me everything, he said. So she did. Benjamin listened without interrupting as Elena explained the last 3 years. Meeting Adrian at the museum, falling in love, getting married, slowly realizing her husband was more interested in her potential as an accessory than as a person. The pregnancy that had thrilled her and seemed to repulse him. Simone's arrival in his life. The increasing cruelty. Last night's expulsion. And you didn't tell him who you really are, Benjamin said. It wasn't a question. How could I? The will. The will is meant to protect you, Elena, not trap you. Benjamin opened his portfolio and pulled out documents. Your father never intended for you to suffer in silence to protect an inheritance. If you're in danger, I'm not in danger. I'm just humiliated, heartbroken, pregnant and homeless. Elena laughed bitterly, but not in danger. You're not homeless. You own 14 properties in this city alone that I can't access openly without revealing my identity, which I can't do for another 3 months. Benjamin studied her carefully. What do you want to do? Also, it was a good question. What did she want? To make Adrian pay? To expose him as a fraud who had married her thinking she was poor while his company survived only because of her hidden money? To take everything from him the way he had taken everything from her? I want him to understand what he's done, Elena said slowly. I want him to feel what I'm feeling right now. Lost, scared, alone. I can arrange that. Benjamin pulled out another document. Do you know what happens if the Castellano group withdraws its investment from Northwood Enterprises? Elena felt her heart skip. He would lose majority funding. He would lose everything. The company would collapse within weeks. Adrian would go from billionaire to bankrupt. Every property deal would fall through. Every investor would flee. His name would become synonymous with failure. Benjamin's expression was fierce. Your father trusted me to protect you, Elena. Let me do this for you. It was tempting. So tempting. One word from her, and Benjamin could destroy Adrian's world as completely as Adrian had destroyed hers. Justice served cold and final. But then the baby kicked a gentle flutter against her ribs like a reminder of something she had almost forgotten. This wasn't just about her anymore. No, Elena said. Not yet. I need to think. Elena, I have 3 months until I turn 30. 3 months until I can claim my inheritance openly. If I destroy him now, he'll never know it was me. He'll never understand that the woman he threw away was the one keeping him afloat. She placed her hand on her belly. And I need to figure out what kind of person I want to be, what kind of mother I want to be before I make that choice. Benjamin looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded. At least let me help you practically. I'll set up accounts in your name that aren't connected to the main trust. Enough money to live comfortably while you decide what to do. And I'll find you a proper place to stay quietly so no one knows the source. Thank you. There's something else you should know. Benjamin hesitated. I've been tracking Northwood Enterprises as part of my duty to monitor your investments. In the last 6 months, Adrian has been making increasingly risky deals, leveraging properties beyond their value, taking on debt he can't service. If he continues on this trajectory, the company will fail even without you pulling your investment. What are you saying? I'm saying Adrian Northwood is a worse businessman than you realized. He's been lucky riding on the resources your fund provided and the reputation he built when he was younger and more careful. But success has made him reckless. Benjamin's expression was grave. With or without your intervention, his empire is going to crumble. The question is whether you want to be there to see it happen. Elena looked out the hotel window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Adrian was probably having breakfast with Simone in the penthouse, celebrating his freedom from his inconvenient pregnant wife. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was already cracking. I want to see it happen, Elena said, but I want him to know it was me. I want to look him in the eye when his world falls apart and tell him exactly who I really am. Then we wait 3 months, Benjamin said, and we prepare. For the next 12 weeks, Elena lived in a beautiful apartment in the Riverside district, a property she secretly owned, but rented from the management company like any ordinary tenant. Benjamin had set up clean accounts that drew from her trust without revealing the ultimate source. To the world, she was simply a pregnant woman living on savings, waiting out the months until her baby arrived.